going on, you guys? And welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be doing a different kind of video. We're going to talk about what I think are the biggest fights to make in each division. Now, will the fights make sense? No. I'm just going to say what I believe are the biggest fights to make in the division. Championship fights only. So it will have to be against the current champion. So for example, Brandon Moreno is the flyweight champion. It will have to be Brandon Moreno versus somebody. Same thing with Aljamain Sterling, and it goes on and on and on until we get through every division, including the women's divisions as well. And some rules, obviously, they have to face somebody who is in the UFC. So I can't do a fight between, let's say, Leon Edwards and George St. Pierre. George St. Pierre is no longer in the UFC, so it wouldn't make any sense to make that fight. Even though that fight would do a lot of numbers, it just doesn't make any sense. George St. Pierre is not a fighter. So we're going to go through each division. So we're going to start with the flyweight division for the men's. Brandon Moreno, to me, the biggest fight in the division, it's sad, it's Figueiredo. Figueiredo versus Brandon Moreno is obviously one of the best rivalries in MMA, especially in that division in general. And to me, that's the biggest fight because there's not too many big names in the 125-pound division. I mean, Figueiredo and Moreno are the two biggest names in the division. So obviously, if you do a fifth fight between them, it will gain some traction. Will people get tired of it? Yes. But it will garner attention, more attention than even Pantoja, because I believe Brandon Moreno is going to be fighting Pantoja next. And even though people are hyped for it, and I am a part of that, I mean, it's a co-main. It's going to be the co-main, I believe, for... Is it UFC 290 that is the co-main? I believe that fight has already been announced. But I mean, it's not as big as a fight compared to Figueiredo, because Figueiredo is a bigger name. So Brandon Moreno versus Figueiredo, to me, is the biggest fight that they can make for the championship fight in the 125-pound division. Bantamweight, Aljamain Sterling versus Sean O'Malley is the biggest fight in the division. I was considering that the fight that they have right now was probably the biggest, but Cejudo, I mean, I don't know. I think Sean O'Malley definitely has a bigger fan base. He has a bigger following. So I feel like if anybody is going to really sell pay-per-views, it's Sean O'Malley. I mean, Sean O'Malley always gains interest, always, all the time. And I think a fight between Aljamain Sterling, even though Aljamain Sterling is not really a big name, even as a champion, he's not really that big of a name just because he doesn't garner interest. I'm sorry. I mean, to be honest with you, Aljamain Sterling, even though he's a great fighter, he just doesn't gain any type of interest to me. You know what I mean? Because obviously his fight style is not that entertaining. Obviously, he's a wrestler. A lot of people, I'm not saying, okay, because Khabib was obviously one of the biggest names in the lightweight division. But, you know, when you look at Aljamain Sterling fight, and you saw his last fight with, you know, obviously Peter Yan, you know, what he did, it wasn't really all that interesting, to be honest with you. But Sean O'Malley, you look at Sean O'Malley's fight style, and you see the following that he has. He just looks different with the rainbow hair and everything. He has a big following on Instagram, big following just overall in social media. He will garner a lot of interest, and I believe that will be the biggest fight in the bantamweight division for the championship. Okay, so yeah, I will go Aljamain Sterling versus Sean O'Malley will be the biggest championship fight that they could do. Featherweight, Alexander Volkanovski is the current champion. They're doing Yair Rodriguez. I don't know. Part of me wants to say Max Holloway 4, but there's not really. I mean, yeah, I think it has to be Max Holloway. If I'm being honest with you, I will say Max Holloway. Because I was leaning, I mean, Yair's a pretty big fight too, but I think Max Holloway is the biggest name in the division. Obviously, he has a big fan base. Will people be interested in it? You know, I mean, kind of, a little bit. I mean, it's Max Holloway. But there's just the way that Volkanovski dominated Max Holloway. It really isn't that intriguing. But it's still probably the biggest fight that you can do between a champion and just a challenger. So yeah, I will say Volkanovski and Max Holloway 4. It's the biggest fight in the division. So yeah. So let's continue to the lightweight division. I mean, this is obvious. The current champion is Islam Makhachev. The biggest name in the sport, Conor McGregor. I mean, I'm going to put only Conor in this division because that's the last division that he fought in. I'm not going to put him in the 170-pound division. I'm going to keep him as a lightweight. So obviously Islam Makhachev versus Conor McGregor, that does insane numbers. You got a history between Khabib and Conor. Islam is the protege of Khabib. Storyline writes itself. It's going to be a lot of trash talk, probably a lot of outside the octagon type shenanigans happening with Conor. You never know what the hell he's going to do. He does some crazy shit all the time. So he will do some crazy shit, I'm assuming. And yeah, that will do insane numbers. That probably does probably over 2 million if I'm being honest with you. I don't know. It doesn't do as much as Khabib and Conor, but it still does a lot. It does probably at least 2 mil, I think. I think it does just over 2 million. Because I mean, Conor's the biggest name in the sport, and if he's able to get a title shot against Islam, I mean, people are going to be interested. It's Conor getting a title shot, and it's Conor McGregor. I mean, it's the biggest name in the sport by far, so yeah. So that's the biggest fight in the division. That's obvious. Leon Edwards, obviously the welterweight champion. Interesting. I'm going to have to say Colby Covington. Colby Covington is the most entertaining 170-pounder when it comes to the trash talk and stuff like that. He will be able to sell the most pay-per-views out of everybody. Obviously, with Jorge Masvidal no longer being a part of, even though Jorge is probably one of the bigger names, that doesn't entice anybody because obviously Jorge will lose to Leon Edwards, especially what happened between him and Gilbert Burns. I mean, he got destroyed by Gilbert Burns. It wasn't even close. Yeah, I mean, Leon smokes him. So Colby Covington gives, to me, Colby Covington and Leon Edwards, that's a very intriguing fight. And it's a close fight. It's kind of like a pick-em at this point. I mean, I'm leaning towards Leon to win that fight. I mean, and I believe that fight is going to happen. So yeah, I'm going to go Leon Edwards and Colby Covington. I think that is probably the biggest fight to make in the division. I don't think another Kamaru Usman fight doesn't really, you know what I mean? Khamzat, now they put Khamzat as a 170-pounder. I'm going to leave Khamzat, and you guys probably know what I'm going to go with the next division. But I'm going to leave Khamzat for the 185-pound division. I'm going to leave Colby Covington versus Leon Edwards for this division. I believe that's the biggest fight in this division to make. And by the way, when it comes to this, I only want to leave one challenger per each division. I'm not going to go Conor McGregor versus this and Conor McGregor versus the heavyweight champion, and we'll do probably the most number. I mean, Conor McGregor versus John Jones, are you out of your mind? I mean, bro, that's just a spectacle in its own. I mean, it's stupid to even think about that, but yeah, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. So yeah, anyway, so Colby Covington versus Leon Edwards, biggest fight to make in that division. 185, Israel Adesanya versus Khamzat Chimaev. Obviously, the biggest competition for somebody like Israel Adesanya is a wrestler, somebody who's a big name, is Khamzat Chimaev. He has gained a huge following over the past 3 years, obviously because in the pandemic, he was fighting consistently, and here he is now, one of the bigger names in the sport. And I do believe that's a bigger fight than Robert Whittaker, the trilogy between him and Robert Whittaker, because it's something different, especially if he is able to keep his undefeated streak. He beats, I believe he's going to be fighting Paulo Costa. He beats Paulo Costa. It just makes it seem a much more intriguing fight for the fans. It's like, ooh, can Izzy get the job done against Khamzat Chimaev? Who knows? And I believe it does a lot of numbers. I think it's one of the bigger fights, actually, that I've mentioned, to be honest with you, because Izzy's obviously coming off a big win, one of the bigger names in the sport as well. And Khamzat, I mean, is just an up-and-coming challenger who's undefeated, who is extremely dominant. And we'll see him against Israel Adesanya. That's a very interesting matchup, to say the least. And I believe that's the biggest fight in the division. Light heavyweight, Jamal Hill is the current champ. I want to go two different competitors, and I might have to pick between the two. The first one is Yuri Prochazka. The second one, I'm going to put this man in the division because I believe he's going to go up. It's Alex Pereira. Alex Pereira or Yuri Prochazka. Take your pick. What do you think is a bigger fight for Jamal Hill? I'm leaning towards Pereira. I'm going to say Pereira. Just because Pereira's already kind of got a name for himself. I mean, even though Yuri has got a name for himself too. But Pereira, I mean, he's already gained so much popularity. It's the same thing with Yuri. But it's just something about Alex Pereira going up in weight and possibly, being the 205-pound champion. I think people are more excited about that than Yuri Prochazka. For some reason, I feel like if you had to compare, I think Pereira does more pay-per-view numbers than Yuri Prochazka. And I could be wrong, but I think for the most part I am correct. I think I'm correct. I think Alex Pereira will do more numbers than Yuri Prochazka because he's going up in weight. Obviously, he beat Izzy, then lost to Izzy. But if he goes up in weight, imagine, and he gets the job done, and is a champion in two different weight divisions, the middleweight division and the 205 light heavyweight division, that is insane. That's crazy to even think about. So I got to say that Alex Pereira versus Jamal Hill is the biggest fight in that division. So I'm going to go with that. And the heavyweight fight. This is not the final fight I'm going to be talking about because I'm going to go run through the women's division as well. But Jon Jones obviously is the champ. I wish it was Francis Ngannou. I really do. Francis Ngannou is the biggest fight versus Jon Jones. That's like the biggest fight that the UFC could possibly make. It's insane that it will probably never happen. But obviously for now, it's Stipe Miocic versus Jon Jones. It's the heavyweight GOAT versus the GOAT. It's kind of sad. I mean, in my opinion, I really do enjoy. I like Stipe, but Francis versus Jon Jones, man, it writes itself. The most dangerous man on the planet versus the undisputed GOAT going head to head. The guy who has one-punch knockout power versus the greatest fighter to ever do it. I mean, bro, they don't even have to say anything and it's going to do over 1 million pay-per-view buys. It's literally just right there in front of you. I mean, bro, the writing's on the wall. You don't even have to really do too much promotion for it. People are going to tune in. I mean, if you do promotion, obviously going to do better. But this does over 1 million pay-per-view buys. I will be shocked if it doesn't do 1 million pay-per-view buys. It is the most intriguing matchup that the UFC could possibly do. If they announce that tomorrow, I'm telling you right now, that tweet is going to go insane. It's going to trend #1 worldwide by far. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that Jon Jones versus Stipe announcement is not going to do great, and it might be #1 world. But bro, the levels. Just imagine Francis versus Jon Jones. I understand I'm supposed to talk about Stipe, but I mean, listen. I got Jon Jones beating Stipe. He didn't really have too many weaknesses. He did look a little slower, but still, I don't know. Stipe is getting a lot older. He's a lot older. And he hasn't fought in a while. But yeah, it's the biggest fight. I mean, it's Stipe. He's the heavyweight GOAT. So, versus Jon Jones, that's a great fight. And it's possibly Jon Jones' final fight. So, yeah. I mean, he's going to do big numbers anyway. So, I don't think it does 1 million, but it still does good numbers. Okay? And we'll get into the women's fights real quick. I'm going to talk about them. Flyweight, obviously. Should we do strawweight? We should do strawweight first. Zhang Weili is the current champ. I believe you probably do Rose Namajunas 3, the trilogy. And I think that's probably the best possible fight, the biggest possible fight. Unless there's somebody that I'm completely missing that is a big name. But I think Doug Rose versus Zhang Weili, I think that's probably the big fight in the division. Alexa Grasso, obviously probably against Shevchenko. Yeah, because there's really nobody else. I mean, there's nobody else. So, it literally has to be her. Can I cheat? Can I put Amanda Nunes versus Valentina here at 135? Listen, I understand, I know. Oh, you're only Valentina's supposed to fight once. Bro, Valentina Shevchenko versus Amanda Nunes 3 has to happen at some point. Especially if Valentina can get the belt back against Alexa Grasso. You have to do Valentina versus Amanda 3. That is the best possible fight that you can do. There's obviously two of the greatest women's fighters that we've ever seen ever going up against each other. And that fight, I feel like, needs to happen again. I understand that technically Nunes is up 2-0, but the second fight, I believe, was very close, and arguably Valentina won that fight. You have to do that fight. So I'm gonna cheat a little bit. Juliana Penn is gonna fight Amanda Nunes. Nobody cares. That pay-per-view is gonna do horribly, by the way. I'm predicting that pay-per-view is like bottom tier. That's a bottom tier level selling pay-per-view. I mean, let's be honest. I would be surprised if it does over 70,000. So 70,000 pay-per-view buys is what I mean. So yeah. In 145, I mean, bro, the featherweight championship woman, there's not even a person listed here. She fights her clone. There you go. That's it. I'll see you guys with another video soon. I hope you guys enjoyed this type of video. And yeah, see you soon. Peace.